They're not where you think you are. So once again, keep putting it out there. When you put it out there long enough, and they see it everywhere they go, the dots start to connect. They'll say, wow, okay, I've seen that Paint Out Loud stuff here, there, and everybody's talking about it. Everybody at the house I go to, they have a piece sitting there on their mantle or on the wall. Then it starts to connect. It takes some time, though.
Yeah.
All right. Milton.
Yeah, I can attest to that, because when I first started writing in 2005, I did it because I wanted to, of course, incorporate African and African American culture into speculative fiction. Mm-hmm. And now the multicultural wave has hit the publishing industry. Now everybody's talking about multicultural. About 2 years after we let out the Griots anthology, a wave of anthologies came out, multicultural anthologies, long hidden, different anthologies like that. And I'm trying to be modest. I'm like, well, coincidental thing. But recently, we announced that we were going to do a new Griots anthology, which was going to focus on young adults. And we were going because I've been hearing a lot from a lot of parents. Every time they came to some of our sessions, they said, "I wish you guys would write something like this for kids." And so I said, "Well, let's do an anthology." And one of the other anthologies that came out after ours, they just announced that they were going to do another anthology, and it's going to be young adults. And we had announced this. This is like a couple of weeks after we had let out our press release saying this is what we're going to do. So when we first started, this is a group of us writers. When we first started doing this, we didn't see that kind of stuff happening. Mm. But as our books have gotten out there and the writers have promoted it, now we're starting to see this stuff happen. But for me, as far as creating the work, you have to have the passion. Yes. The passion has to be there. I tried to write for a long time, but until I went through my African Renaissance in the 90s, when I decided I wanted to learn everything about African history and culture in different parts of Africa as I could, that's when I found my passion. That's when I really started sitting down trying to write, because I was trying to do this European medieval sword and sorcery stuff, and I'd write stories and I just couldn't feel it. I'm not feeling this. But then I started doing all this research, and then it just clicked. I said, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is what I want to do. This is what I'm going to do, because this has me excited. I have a whole bookshelf full of African and African American historical references and novels and everything like that. It's just a whole bookshelf. And I've read every last one of those books, and I incorporate all that into my work. And and I knew that from a business standpoint, I felt like in order to make it work, I had to find those readers who were just as passionate about what I was writing.
That's right.
As I was about writing it. And so I went to those places where I thought I would find those readers. The first book signing I did was at the Starbucks on Cascade Road back when Magic Johnson owned it. Mm-hmm. And because I used to go in that place all the time, and I knew there was a group of people that probably would resonate with what I was doing. And I was right. I went and did my sale there, and people just bought books left and right and stuff. And but over the years, I've been able to focus on and find those people who are excited about it. And actually, they kind of found me. After my books got out there, I got an order from a guy in Tampa. It was most books I ever sold anybody. They ordered like about $300 worth of books. Ooh, and I'm like, where did this come from? Where this guy, he just ordered a bunch of books. And so then about 3 months later, the same guy placed another order just as big. And he finally got in contact with me on Facebook and told me about there's an Afrocentric homeschooling community throughout the United States. And they saw my books, because my books were relating to African culture and tradition and history, and those were the kind of books they wanted their children to read. And the word just kind of spread. Mm-hmm. And I did a convention with a convention this year called Liberated Minds, which was focusing on that particular group. And when I had my book set up, people were coming to me and say, "Yeah, I bought this book 3 months ago. I bought this book a year ago." So we kind of found that group, and those are the people who are passionate about our work, and those are the people who are going out and telling everybody else about our work. And just like, we were talking here, once you have other people saying, this book is good, you need to go get it, people go get it.
That's right.
There may be some other book out there that's just as good as yours, but people are talking about your work, and that's how it's starting to spread. So for me, it's about having the passion, finding where, the customers that people that resonate with your work. Every now and then I'll go on a tangent. I'll go do a show or something that has nothing to do with what I do, just to see what's going to happen.
See what happens, yeah.
You know, and so far I've been you know, pleasantly surprised, because I found out that what I'm doing actually goes beyond the audience that I'm targeting. That there are other people who thought, they say they've always thought what I was doing would be a good idea, but they never saw anybody do it. So they see it and they say, they'll say, you know what? I always thought somebody should have done that. You know, and they'll buy the book and then they'll spread it around like that. So that's why every now and then I'll do something left field just to see if, you know, just what's going to see if I may have an audience in that area and stuff like that.
So it's good to throw stuff against the wall.
And something.
Yeah, every now and then I do. I follow a plan most of the time, but every now and then I'll say, you know, I think I'm going to go to this country western convention and throw some books up and see what happens. You know, that kind of just to see what's going to happen. You know.
Because I'm gonna add to that too. And I'm sorry, Floyd, you still up. You know, people want they want the whole story about who you are, and that's another thing I think that helps sell what I do. I do a lot of things. You know, I'm all over the place. I do a lot of stuff. I'm just having a ball. I'm doing wild stuff. I'm at every event. I'm trying to do everything I could possibly do. People see that. They feel that energy. So once again, now they want to know the story behind you. Because like you said, some artists, you know, you can't even communicate with them. They're so crabby about stuff. You can't even talk to them. So that turns you off right there. They might have great work, but you don't even want to talk to the person. But those people that have that personality that pulls you in, and you can talk to them, and they see the stuff you've done, it really makes them perk up even more to even want to buy that art even more, because now there's a story behind it. That really works.
I need to hire some actors.
No, I'm serious.
Man.
Well, you have that passion, so
Yeah,
you know.
exactly.
You know.
You become a character to them, you know. Once they see, they're like, "Oh my God, you know, we love this person. He's bigger than life."
You're
you
right.
know,
You're right.
really.
Got it.
So I will say that as I'm creating in this media context, just as some background, I've never done a podcast interview with, I won't say never, but I think I'm pretty confident in saying never. That I've never done a podcast interview with someone who I didn't have some prior context with either them or their art. Because I feel like in doing my research, I want to know who they are. Because if my goal is to have a conversation such that anyone who hears it feels something about that artist, then I have to know something about that artist or their work. So I'm pretty forward-leaning when it comes to being active and being out in the art community. So, and I'm not doing things, I think from like an artificial standpoint, but I'm genuinely interested in who this person is, and I want the public to feel that same interest. So whether it's a performance that they're having, or, you know, if it's I remember I had a conversation with one of the lead dancers at the Atlanta Ballet. I go to the ballet. Like I really want to have questions that are relevant, because otherwise I'm not being as genuine as I can be if I'm asking you questions, because there's a pretty good chance that in every conversation I'm probably going to ask you a question that comes from some interaction that we've had, because I feel like that's something that made it compelling. So I was having a conversation with a guy who was from England, and he's a big Arsenal Football Club fan, and we're talking about Arsenal, like in the podcast. Like we spent a good part of the conversation talking about international football, world football, soccer for the American fans, and we're talking about how we're kind of comparing soccer and artistry, and we're finding some parallels there. But he and I had a conversation about that already. So I'm curious about how he thinks about these things as it relates to his art being in America. We have this long conversation about that. So I try to just listen and be authentic, because I think when people know that you actually care about what they're doing,
That's right.
they'll open up to you in a conversation. So we're having a conversation, we may talk for 20 or 30 minutes. I want that conversation to be meaningful for me, meaningful for them, and have it not be a standard boilerplate conversation that you could read online, where you have the sort of general questions, general responses. So I think for me, all of that goes into, I guess, what some people consider research. But for me, it's just more interest. Like, I'm just interested in who they are, because in some way I feel like that helps inform their art. And yeah, I think that's
because they can feel that, Floyd. They can tell. They can tell if you're genuine. They know.
And thank you for doing that, because I did a lot of interviews when I first started writing where somebody said, I want to interview you, and then I'll say, well, what is speculative fiction? They don't even know about what you write, exactly. And then they've never read your book. And so, you're in there, so I got to the point where when somebody would ask me for an interview, I say, well, have you read anything that I've written? You know what speculative fiction is? If they say no, then I say, well, I really don't want to do this interview, because we're going to spend the whole interview I'm going to be trying to explain to you what I do.
Right. Yep.
And so it wasn't trying to be snobbish or anything. It's just that when you do an interview, you want to talk to people who are aware of what you're doing and aware of the whole genre that you work in. So you'll have interesting questions and you'll have stuff to talk about. Right?
And I mean, this just happened last week. So there's an artist who had been living in Atlanta for about 7 years, Brittany Bosco, for anyone who's listening. And she moved to New York. And so we had this conversation last year about her in Atlanta and her place in the art community here. And she left Atlanta. Didn't tell a lot of people, but I knew that she left the city. I was in New York for a few days, looked her up, found out, said, hey, are you still here? Let's meet up. We did a follow-up interview, at the studio where she was working, and we talked about, why did you leave Atlanta? What is your perception of the Atlanta arts community now that you've left for a few months? Like, really talked about some of her own challenges and some of her own big goals and dreams on why she left and why she still feels like this is a place where she's going to come back to at some point. But it was just interesting that in that context, because we had already built up a relationship, I could seek her out and say, you got time to meet up this afternoon? Sure, let's make it happen. And I think that was one of those instances where it was able to really provide more context to listeners to understand the artist and how artists think about their career and the moves that they make. Yeah. So
let me add this in real quick. This might change the direction of this conversation. No. I mean, just a few days ago, I'm sitting under palm trees in L.A. I got an official report because people send official reports to me. Atlanta right now, official report came out that we're 39th on the national list in the arts as far as getting the art out in the culture. 39th. That does not sound good. I could not believe that. I thought I was in Cleveland. I believed it. I came from Cleveland. But that just came out about Atlanta just a few days ago. So now we're really motivated to do something here.
Yeah.
Don't give up. Just motivate.
Oh, yeah, we have to. I mean, this city is too nice of a city to be 39th. I'm sorry. That means something's not connecting there.
But the thing about Atlanta that I noticed as far as from a writer standpoint is that people are open to what you're doing. I'll talk about science fiction and fantasy, and I know people in other cities that say, well, I can't push what I do because people are not interested in it. But in Atlanta, people may not, maybe it's that southern thing, people may not be interested in it, but they'll listen. And they'll give you the opportunity. And I've had other writers that have come from other areas that say, what you guys are doing here in Atlanta, we couldn't do in Chicago. We couldn't do here because the people aren't open to they're not open to what you're doing. But here in Atlanta, they're open and people are, listening to what you do and stuff,
And to that point, Milton, I'm not sure, Neal, you didn't get the context for what that ranking was.
No, exactly.
Was based on.
Exactly.
But what I will say is that even in that context, when I was in New York, and how you mentioned that sometimes you're ahead of where people are.
Yeah.
A lot of artists feel like Atlanta is ahead. The artists with the work.
Oh yes.
So from a creative standpoint and from the quality of work, there are lots of artists who feel like Atlanta is on the leading edge, and that it will take some time for people to catch up to us. And when that happens, then the infrastructure, the dollars will then soon follow. But a lot of artists look to Atlanta for, as you mentioned, Milton, opportunity, and also for creative leadership. So lots of that is happening here. I think that it just takes sort of wrapping our arms around that with more support and infrastructure, and then I think you'll see whatever ranking that was, Atlanta will, climb those rankings.
Yeah, I think it's like unfair. Like I can get more details on, of course. And like you said, there's a new guard coming in, so things are changing here. But then, like you said, there is an old guard too. There's some Southern things